Thanks for tuning in to the Jurassic Park cast, the Jurassic Park podcast where guests chat with me about Michael Crichton's 1990 novel Jurassic Park. And also not that too. A big shout out to Christoph Oakes of Snale, and a big thank you to him for letting me use his band's music to score this podcast. And you can find his music on Spotify and Bandcamp. Today's intro is from the song Maybe Days, from Snale's second album, Charlemagne, and the outro is Atom Age Vampire, Cat in the Brain, from Snale's debut album, Snale. Alright, please hear out this clip from episode 68, The Badlands, where I continue my comparative review of the film Jurassic Park, scene by scene, and identifying which elements the script has borrowed from the novel. Here's the excerpt. Alright, we're continuing our review of Spielberg's 1993 blockbuster Jurassic Park and identifying all the details the script has adapted from the novel, scene by scene, and today's scene is the Badlands. Alright, so the camera cuts to a velociraptor toe claw being brushed off, and then it reveals a whole skeleton is being excavated, and the caption reads Badlands, near Snakewater, Montana. So a man is yelling, Dr. Grant, Dr. Sattler, we're ready to try again, and Alan says, I hate computers. And Sattler says, the feeling's mutual, and then a lead bullet gets loaded into a machine that blasts the bullet into the ground, and then the man says, you'll get a reading out of that. And the woman says, did it work? And Sattler says, how long does it usually take? And the man says, should bring immediate return. Shoot the radar into the ground, the bone bounces the image, clicks a knob, bounces it back. Computer reveals a velociraptor skeleton. The new program's incredible. A few more years development, we won't even have to dig anymore. Where's the fun in that, says Grant. It's a little distorted, but I don't think it's the computer. Look, post-mortem contraction of the posterior neck ligaments. Velociraptor? Grant says, yes, good shape too. It's 5-6 feet high, guessing 9 feet long. Look at the extraordinary, and Grant touches the screen and it flickers. What did you do? He touched it. Grant touches the top hood of the computer experimentally and it flickers again. Dr. Grant's not machine compatible. Hell, they got it in for me, he says. And then he adds, and look at the half-moon-shaped bones in the wrists. No wonder these guys learned how to fly. And people laugh at him. He says, no, seriously. All right, maybe dinosaurs have more in common with present-day birds than they do with reptiles. Look at the pubic bones, turned backwards, just like a bird. Look at the vertebrae, full of air sacs and hollows, just like a bird. And even the word raptor means bird of prey. Doesn't look very scary, says some boy, to which people are pretty excited here. More like a 6-foot turkey, and people laugh at him. A turkey, huh? And Alan Grant grins. Oh no, here we go, says Allie. Okay, try to imagine yourself in the Cretaceous period. You get your first look at this 6-foot turkey as you enter a clearing. He moves like a bird, lightly bobbing his head, and you keep still because you think maybe his visual acuity is based on movement, like a T-Rex. He'll lose you if you don't move, but no, not Velociraptor. You stare at him, and he just stares right back, and that's when the attack comes not from the front, but from the side, from the two other raptors you didn't even know were there. Because Velociraptor's a pack hunter, he used coordinated attack patterns, and he is out in force today, and he'll slash at you with this, and he pulls the raptor claw he found, and the boy's eyes grow large with shock. 6-inch retractable claw, like a razor, in the middle toe. He doesn't bother to bite your jugular like, say, a lion. No. He slashes at you here, or here, and he pretends to slash the boy's groin. And Ellie says, oh, Alan. Or maybe across the belly, spilling your intestines. The point is, you're alive when they start to eat you. So, try to show a little respect. Okay. Okay, here's the truth. I already dug through this with a fine-tooth comb back in episode 11 plans, around the 1 hour and 15-minute mark if you'd like to revisit that. But, to recap briefly, the beginning is where the team is excavating the Velociraptor fossil, and it's derived from the chapter The Shore of the Inland Sea, which we get on page 31 of the novel. Quote, Alan Grant crouched down, his nose inches from the ground. The temperature was over 100 degrees. His knees ached, despite the rugged layers pads he wore. His lungs burned from the harsh alkaline dust. Sweat dripped off his forehead onto the ground. But Grant was oblivious to the discomfort. His entire attention was focused on the 6-inch square of earth in front of him. Working patiently with a dental pick and an artist's camel brush, he exposed a tiny L-shaped fragment of jawbone. It was only 1 inch long and no thicker than his little finger. The teeth were a row of small points and had the characteristic medial angling. Bits of bone flaked away as he dug. Grant paused for a moment to paint the bone with rubber cement before continuing to expose it. There was no question that this was the jawbone from an infant carnivorous dinosaur. Its owner had died 79 million years ago, at the age of about 2 months. With any luck, Grant might find the rest of the skeleton as well. If so, it would be the first complete skeleton of a baby carnivore. So this is not a fully articulated, complete specimen of an adult velociraptor, but instead a jaw fragment from an infant. But he's interrupted all the same. "Hey, Alan," on page 31, just like in the script. But we get, "He stood, a barrel-chested, bearded man of 40, on page 32, which isn't the same Alan Grant that we get portrayed by Sam Neill. Now, in the film, this person going, "Hey, Alan," is the voice of a volunteer, because they're using the computer-assisted sonic tomography device, or the CAST device. But in the novel, it's not a volunteer. It's Ellie calling him to come and meet what turns out to be Bob Morris from the EPA, or the Environmental Protection Agency, instead. Now, the CAST device doesn't appear in the novel until page 55 in the chapter Plans, after they've been visited by Bob Morris, had a Procomsignathus X-ray faxed to them, and they've been invited by Hammond to visit the island over the phone, and they received a package in the mail revealing the plans for Hammond's mysterious island resort. But the CAST device performs as described in the novel. Quote, "There's a slight vibration and then yellow contour lines traced across the computer screen. This time the resolution was perfect, and Alan Grant had a glimpse of the skeleton. Beautifully defined, the long neck arched back," on page 55. And Sattler is more handsy with Grant, alluding to their romantic entanglements, which is not the state of their relationship in the novel. So in the film, she's kind of a bit more touchy. The computer produces a glimpse of a beautifully defined, perfect resolution image of the long neck and arched back of the infant velociraptor. It's suggested that the remains are imperfect, and then there's an M dash, suggesting that it's in perfect condition, but he's cut off or interrupted. And as Grant touches the screen, the same issue arises in the film. The screen goes blank. And he says, "I hate computers," squinting in the sun. What happened now? "Lost the integrator input," one of the kids says. "Just a minute." The kid bent to look at the tangle of wires going into the back of the battery-powered portable computer. They had set the computer up on a beer carton on top of Hill 4, not far from the device they call the Thumper, on page 55, we're told. Now, in the film, Grant's theory is that dinosaurs evolved into birds, whereas in the novel, he's more concerned with the theory that dinosaurs are far more active and energetic than previously believed. In the chapter Jurassic Park, on page 83, quote, "For 150 years, ever since the discovery of gigantic animal bones in Europe, the study of dinosaurs had been an exercise in scientific deduction. Paleontology was essentially detective work, searching for clues in the fossil bones and the trackways of the long-vanished giants. The best paleontologists were the ones who could make the most clever deductions. And all the great disputes of paleontology were carried out in this fashion, including the bitter debate in which Grant was a key figure about whether dinosaurs were warm-blooded. Scientists had always classified dinosaurs as reptiles, cold-blooded creatures drawing the heat they needed for life from the environment. A mammal could metabolize food to produce bodily warmth, but a reptile could not. Eventually, a handful of researchers, led chiefly by John Ostrom and Robert Bacher at Yale, began to suspect that the concept of sluggish, cold-blooded dinosaurs was inadequate to explain the fossil record. The classic deductive fashion, they drew conclusions from several lines of evidence." And then it gets wrapped up on page 66. "The warm-blooded controversy had raged for 15 years before a new perception of dinosaurs as quick-moving, active animals was accepted, but not without lasting animosities. At conventions, there were still colleagues who did not speak to one another." So, Novel Grant argues for a new perception of dinosaurs as, quote, quick-moving, active animals, rather than the film Grant, who argues that it's no wonder these guys learned to fly. Now, in the novel, the kids, quote-unquote, are what Grant refers to as volunteers or students who are assisting at the dig site as described. Quote, "He saw the kids working around the jackhammer, moving away big pieces of rock after checking them for fossils," on page 32. And, quote, "On the other hill, the kids looked up with interest." Or on page 52 from the chapter Plans, quote, "This just came to me," Ellie said the next day, walking to the back of the trailer with a thick manila envelope. "One of the kids brought it back from town. It's from Hammond." Or when they were repairing the image on the computer monitor, quote, "Lost the integrator input," one of the kids said. Just a minute on page 55. These aren't literal kids, although in the film, it's literally a kid. So it's faithful to the text too, but just a little too literally. And the terrifying rant Grant unleashes on the kid is actually a mental note he takes while reviewing the computer's output on page 56. He saw the complete skeleton, traced in bright yellow. It was indeed a young specimen, the outstanding characteristic of Velociraptor, the single-toed claw, which in full-grown animals was a curved 6-inch long weapon capable of ripping open its prey, was in this infant no larger than the thorn on a rose bush. It was hardly visible at all on the screen, and Velociraptor was a lightly built dinosaur in any case, an animal as fine-boned as a bird, and presumably as intelligent. Here the skeleton appeared in perfect order, except that the head and neck were bent back toward the posterior. Now, the film gives us two valuable movie-specific details that are useful, that raptors hunt in packs using a decoy, which we see in Robert Muldoon's Demise, and that T-Rex has a visual acuity based on movement, which helps Grant save Lex's life later on. Both pack-hunting velociraptors and a Tyrannosaurus visual acuity being based on movement are authentic to the novel. As Regis says of the raptors on page 114. Quote, the females are the real hunters. They're pack hunters, you know. And Dr. Harding says on page 202, quote, dinosaurs have excellent visual acuity, but they have a basic amphibian visual system. It's attuned to movement. They don't see unmoving things well at all. Now we get the line, that doesn't look very scary, more like a 6-foot turkey. This is actually said by an attendant in the novel. It says, it doesn't look very fearsome to me, on page 57. But recall, they're looking at an infant where the outstanding characteristic of Velociraptor, the single-toed claw, which in full-grown animals 6-inch long curved weapon capable of ripping open its prey, was in this infant no larger than the thorn on a rosebush, and hardly visible at all. That's why it doesn't look very fearsome. In the novel, Grant is interrupted by a kid, which spurs him into imagining velociraptors and serves Crichton the opportunity to present this dinosaur species as a worthy villain in the book. Grant says, pound for pound, a velociraptor was the most rapacious dinosaur that ever lived. Although relatively small, about 200 pounds the size of a leopard, velociraptors were quick, intelligent, and vicious, able to attack with sharp claws, powerful clawed forearms, and the devastating single claw on the foot. Velociraptors hunted in packs, and Grant thought it might have been a sight to see a dozen of these animals racing at full speed, leaping onto the back of a much larger dinosaur, tearing at the neck, and slashing at the ribs and belly. That's on 57. In the film, Spielberg uses this quote to do the same thing, basically. Grant says, you stare at him and he just stares right back, and that's when the attack comes not from the front, but from the side. From the other two raptors you didn't even know were there, because Velociraptor is a pack hunter, he uses coordinated attack patterns, and he is out in force today, and he slashes at you with this. He pulls out the claw that he found, and the boy's eyes grow large with shock. A 6-inch retractable claw like a razor on the middle toe. He doesn't bother to bite your jugular like, say, a lion. He slashes at you here or here, or maybe across the belly, spilling your intestines. The point is, you're alive when they start to eat you. Raptors do spill intestines in the book, too. Henry Wu has his intestines removed, and he's eaten alive. That is authentic to the book. In both cases, velociraptors are described as dangerous, coordinated pack hunters with deadly claws and worthy villains for our story. All right, in Koepp's first draft of this scene, it reads like this. An artist's camel hair brush carefully sweeps away sand and rock to slowly reveal the dark curve of a fossil. It's a claw. A dentist's pick gently lifts it from the place it has laid for millions of years. Pull up to reveal a group of diggers working on a large skeleton. All we see are the tops of their hats. The paleontologist working on the claw lays it in his hand. And it's Grant. 4 complete skeletons. Such a small area. The same time horizon. And then Ellie says, they died together? Grant says, the taphonomy sure looks that way. Ellie says, if they died together, they lived together. Suggests some kind of social order. Grant, mid-30s, a ragged-looking guy with intense concentration you wouldn't want to get in the way of, carefully examines the claw. Dr. Ellie Sadler, working with him, leans in close and studies it too. She paints the exposed bone with rubber cement. Ellie in her late 20s, athletic-looking. There's an impatience about Ellie, as if nothing in life happens quite fast enough for her. Her face is almost pressed up against his. She's sitting so close. Grant continued. They hunted as a team. The dismembered Tenontosaurus bone over there, that's lunch. But what killed our raptor in a lake bed, in a bunch like this? We better come up with something that makes sense. Ellie says, a drought. The lake was shrinking. Grant, excited. That's good. That's right. They died around a dried up puddle, without fighting each other. This is looking good. From the bottom of the hill, a voice shouts to them. Dr. Grant, Dr. Sadler, we're ready to try again. Grant signs and sits up, stretching his back. I guess he might sigh. It says here, sigh. Grant sighs and sits up, stretching his back. I hate computers. He shoves the claw absent-mindedly into his pocket, and he and Ellie walk toward the source of the voice. As they walk, we get our first look at the Badlands. Exposed outcroppings of crumbling limestone stretch for miles in every direction. Not a tree or bush in sight. In the dig itself, the ground is checkered with excavations everywhere. There's a base camp with 5 or 6 teepees, a flapping mess tent, a few cards, maybe that means cars, a flatbed truck with wrapped fossils loaded on it, and a mobile home. There are a dozen volunteers of all ages at work in various places around the dig. The volunteers are from all walks of life, dinosaur buffs. 3 or 4 of them have children with them, and the kids run around like in a giant sandbox. Grant, Ellie, and a volunteer walk down the hill. Grant spots a kid kicking dirt onto one of the digs. He notices and frowns. What's that kid doing? And he says to the kid, what are you doing there? You can't, just back off. This is very fragile. Are you out of your mind? Get off of that. Go find your parents. And he says to Ellie, did you see what he just did? The kid stomps away, pissed off. kid swears at Grant, and Grant says to Ellie, "Why do they have to bring the kids?" And Ellie says, "You could hire your help, but there's 4 summers of work here with the money for one, and you say it's a learning experience, sort of a vacation. You get volunteers with kids." He and Ellie arrive on where several volunteers are clustered around a computer terminal that's set up on a table in a small tent, its flaps lashed open. Grant says to the volunteer there, "Ready to give it a shot, Jerry?" And a little girl moves a little too close to the machine. And Ellie says, "Want to watch the computer?" And gets that kid away from there. And she moves her out of Grant's way to a place that she can see. And the volunteer says, "Thumper ready?" "Ready." "Fire." The volunteer throws a switch on the machine that looks a bit like a floor buffer. The whole thing hops up into the air as it drives a soft lead pellet into the earth with a tremendous force. There is a dull thud. The earth seems to vibrate, and all eyes turn to the computer screen. "How long does this usually take?" says Ellie. "It should be an immediate return. You shoot the radar into the ground, the bone bounces back, and the screen suddenly comes alive, yellow contour lines tracing across it in 3 waves, detailing a dinosaur skeleton." The volunteer says, "This new program is incredible. A few more years of development, you won't have to dig anymore." Grant looks at him, and his expression is positively wounded. "Where's the fun in that?" Volunteer, "It looks a little distorted, but I don't think it's the computer." Nellie shakes her head. "Post-mortem contractions of the posterior neck ligaments." "Velociraptor?" "Yes, in good shape too. 5-6 feet high. I'm guessing 9 feet long. Look at that." And he points to part of the skeleton, but when his finger touches the screen, the computer beeps at him, and the image changes, and he pulls his hand back, as if it shocked him. "What did you do?" "He touched it. Dr. Grant is not machine compatible. They've got it in for me." And a volunteer laughs and touches a different part of the screen, which brings the original image back, and Grant continues but doesn't get as close. "Look at the half-moon-shaped bone in the wrist. No wonder these guys learned to fly." And the group laughs, and Grant is surprised. Now, seriously, show of hands, how many of you have read my book? Everyone stops laughing and looks away. Ellie raises her hand supportively, and so does the volunteer in Grant's size. Great. Well, maybe dinosaurs have more in common with present-day birds than reptiles. Look at the pubic bone. It says public bone. Look at the pubic bone. It's turned backwards, just like a bird. The vertebrae, full of hollows and air sacs, just like a bird. Even the word raptor means bird of prey. Remember, that's from the very beginning of the book, too, where Dr. Bobby Carter opens up her dictionary and finds the definition. Raptor means bird of prey. So that's from the book as well. The kid steps forward and looks at the computer skeleton critically. And the kid says, "That doesn't look very scary, more like a 6-foot turkey." And everyone sort of draws in their breath and steps aside, revealing the kid standing alone. Grant turns to the kid and lowers his sunglasses and just stares at him, like he came from another planet. He strolls over to the kid and puts his arms around his shoulders in a friendly way. "Try to imagine yourself in the Jurassic period." But it also says, "Try to imagine yourself in the Cretaceous period." Looks like the author maybe didn't know which one. Ellie rolls her eyes, and then he goes through the same spiel, word for word. He takes a claw from his pocket and holds it in front of the raptor's 3-toed foot. So here you see that when he pulls out this raptor claw, it is actually one that he pulled out absent-mindedly from the dig site when they were earlier, just inches away, scouring it up. So this is where that tool comes from. So here we go. How is this draft drawing stuff out of the novel? Well, Dr. Alan Grant, mid-30s, a ragged-looking guy with intense concentration you wouldn't want to get in the way of. It carefully examines a claw. And this is just like in the novel from page 31. Alan Grant crouched down, his nose inches from the ground. The temperature was over 100 degrees. His knees ached, despite the rug layers pads he wore. His lungs burned from the harsh alkaline dust. Sweat dripped off his forehead onto the ground, but Grant was oblivious to the discomfort. His entire attention was focused on the 6-inch square of earth in front of him. And Ellie has to call, "Hey, Alan," more than once to get his attention. So this focus is derived from the novel well. Also, it's noted he's 40 and barrel-chested with a beard, not ragged-looking in his mid-30s. Oh well. Sattler is working with him, leans in close and studies it too. She paints the exposed bone with rubber cement, and Ellie is in her late 20s, athletic-looking. There's an impatience about Ellie, as if nothing in life happens quite fast enough for her. Quote, from the book, we're told, quote, "Ellie was wearing cut-off jeans and a work shirt tied off at her midriff. She was 24 and darkly tanned. Her blonde hair was pulled back," on page 33. The athletic part of her figure is implied when Bob Morris gapes at her in that chapter. Now, I don't think impatient is how I'd describe Sattler in the novel, but you're welcome to disagree. In fact, she's more of a rolls with the punches kind of gal. Recall when Grant says, "I hate to wait on the money men." Grant grumbles. Ellie shrugs, it goes with the job, on page 63, and when Gennaro discovers that she's not a man, Ellie shakes hands with him, and Gennaro says in surprise, "You're a woman." "These things happen," she said, and Grant thought, she doesn't like him either. And that's also on page 63, so this doesn't portray an impatient youngster, so that's not quite derived from the novel, or wherever they got that from. Next, their considerations on the fossils comes from the book too. They hunted as a team. The dismembered Tenontosaurus bone over there, that's lunch. But what killed our raptors in a lake bed in a bunch like this? We better come up with something that makes sense. From the third iteration we get, actually what I was driving at, Malcolm said, was this. Is it a persuasive animal to you? Is it in fact a dinosaur? I'd say so, yes, says Grant. And the coordinated attack behavior? To be expected, Grant said. According to the fossil record, packs of velociraptors were capable of bringing down animals that weighed 1,000 pounds, like Tenontosaurus, which could run as fast as a horse. Coordination would be required, we're told on page 119. So that is derived from the novel. That's pretty good. Another part from Koepp's first draft here, in the stage direction, we get there's a base camp with 5 or 6 teepees, a flapping mess tent, a few cars, a flatbed truck with wrapped fossils loaded on it, and a mobile home. There are a dozen volunteers of all ages work in various places around the dig. The volunteers all come from different walks of life, but they're dinosaur buffs. 3 or 4 of them have children with them, and the kids run around like they're in a giant sandbox. Is a bit dramatized, but is also similar to the novel. Quote, Grant explained that in 1978, the first year of the excavations, they had come out in North Slope octahedral tents, the most advanced available, but the tents always blew over in the wind. They tried other kinds of tents with the same result. Finally, they started putting up teepees, which were larger inside, more comfortable, and more stable in wind. They're Blackfoot teepees built around 4 poles, Grant said. CU teepees are built around 3, but this used to be Blackfoot territory, so we thought, on page 33. They spell teepee differently. The novel is T-I-P-I, where the script is T-E-E-P-E-E. I don't know which is appropriate, but they are different. And there's some great characterization that kids are at the dig site and they're pissing Grant off, and he's pissing the kids off too. But the concept in the film that Grant and kids don't get along is built nicely into this draft of the script, and I like that. Now, there's a line where the volunteer says, fire! And the screen suddenly comes alive and yellow contour lines trace across it in 3 waves detailing a dinosaur skeleton. And that looks exactly the same in the book, where somebody goes, fire! On page 54. And there was a slight vibration, and then yellow contour lines traced across the computer screen. This time the resolution was perfect, and Ellie Grant had a glimpse of the skeleton, beautifully defined, the long neck arched back. And a note about Grant picking the raptor claw from the dig site and then using it as a prop later in the scene, kind of like a harpy knife, for lack of a better term. I like that. But especially when the claw returns later in the script, the Grant tosses it away because they don't have to dig up dinosaurs anymore. And he admits, I guess we'll just have to evolve too. It's nice to see where that claw came from. And it comes from this moment in the opening scene. All right, in the Scothc-Marmo rewrite. Exterior Badlands afternoon, lodged in the cracked earth, are the partially exposed fossilized remains of a velociraptor, a carnivorous dinosaur, widen out to a sweeping panorama of a dinosaur dig, a major excavation filled with workers, shoveling earth and stone, making measurements, taking photographs, scribbling notes, and conferring with each other. The center of all this activity is one man. In a roped-off area that circumscribes the exposed bones of the raptor is Dr. Alan Grant, head paleontologist, good-looking, late 30s, with a thick beard. Grant lies on his belly, completely absorbed in a small piece of bone. A group of 12 students, notebooks in hand, await his next sentence. Close on, the tiny bone. Grant's nose touches it. Grant brushes the bone with a toothbrush. Then he decides on a quicker way to clean it. He licks it. Excited by his discovery, he gets to his feet and addresses his students who listen raptly. Grant, right calcaneus of an adult female raptor. Mild stress fractures. What does this tell me? Students look at each other, a tentative hand. Grant continues. Tells me that this bone connects to the navicular, which we already found articulating into the cuboid. Off-screen, and a woman shouts to him, Dr. Grant! Dr. Grant! It's Ellie. Grant looks up, and Dr. Sattler, late 20s, sharp-eyed, tough if she wants to be, runs like a gazelle across the arid land. Exuberant, she leaves a trail of dust behind her. She zips by a student guarding the cordoned area, and he tries to stop her. And the student says, Sattler, Dr. Grant is thinking. Dr. Grant waves her over enthusiastically with his bone and continues. Grant, so what can we say for sure? Stress fractures in the heel. Uncertain students, Ellie arrives and immediately gets into it. Ellie, she jumps. Grant turns around to her and smiles. She's got it. Other students too. They knew this all along. Grant, right as rain, Ellie. Now why did she jump? No answer. But Ellie gives it a try. A defensive posture against a vicious, bloodthirsty T-Rex. Grant nods. Perhaps, or maybe to select the smaller, more tender leaves and the higher branches with which to suckle her young. And Ellie jumps up. I bet it was a mating ritual. And the students laughed. One student eyes Grant's self-conscious smile at Ellie. And Grant says, the science of paleontology can't answer these questions. Novelists and artists who dream a vision of the Jurassic period can attempt these questions with their imaginations. What we scientists can say is, considering the mass and kinetic articulation of these bones, this animal had a vertical leap of about 12 feet. Not as entertaining as fiction, but absolutely fact without prejudice. Ellie intrudes again. Excuse me, Dr. Grant, but fact is, we're late. There's a car. And she points. On the horizon, a limousine speeds towards them, leaving a dusty wake. Grant sets the rules for his departure, giving instructions individually as Ellie pulls him away, carrying their bags. Grant says, Jim, you keep an eye making up the plaster batches. Whatever ratio you're using, it's perfect. Nora, no digging after 5. When the temperature drops, those bones get too brittle. Bill, I don't want any tourists walking over my raptor. I don't care if the governor of Montana is with them. Just you guys. Grant and Ellie continue walking, and she interrupts his continued barrage. You know, if every scientist stuck to his methods like you, there'd be no body of theory, no quasars, no Big Bang. Grant stops at the sight of the stopped limo and freezes. Jesus, a limousine. We're re-entering Hammond's world, that's for sure. Remind me why we're doing this, Ellie? Ellie is gentle. She's telling him something they've discussed before. We're leaving the raptor dig at a critical time because Gennaro is paying us $60,000 to observe some resort of Hammond's in Costa Rica, and that's enough money to keep us free of commercial affiliations for 2 summers. All right, good. Then half kidding with Ellie. Financial independence for fraternizing with the enemy. I'll do it. She laughs but can't quite leave. He grabs a computer printout. This is all they could come up with, Skip? Skip turns the printout right side up in Grant's hand. Grant smiles. Wise guy. All right, let's go, Ellie. Grant and Ellie board the limo amidst many goodbyes from the students, and the limo pulls away. So the setting in this is a little bit different. The center of the activity is one man in a roped-off area that circumscribes the exposed bones of the raptor, Dr. Alan Grant, the head paleontologist. He's good-looking, late 30s, with a thick beard. Again, he's not 40, but he does have a beard this time, which is similar to the novel, and he's still excavating a raptor, but it isn't an infant like in the novel. Now, Scotch-Marmo must have done some research because naming specific toe bones instead of just calling them like tarsals or metatarsals or whatever, that's something. It tells me that this bone connects to the navicular, which we already found articulating to the cuboid. Saying that with some authority would be funny. That's some hardcore jargon. Good for her. That said, there's a lot of theorizing and teachable moments between the students and Grant, and specifically Ellie. It's a bit cringy in here, but that's how it is. And a raptor wasn't going to be suckling its youth with tender leaves because it's not a herbivore. And it equally wasn't going to be defending itself against a vicious, bloodthirsty T-Rex because they lived millennia apart from one another. So whatever research Marmo did, there's some research that she also did not do as well. However, Grant's line that paleontology, quote, can't answer these questions, and adds, what we scientists can say is considering that mass and kinetic articulation of these bones, this animal had a vertical leap of about 12 feet. Fact without prejudice. In a way, this is true to Grant in the novel. He says on page 394, way at the end of the book, since bones were all the paleontologists had, bones were what they used. Like other paleontologists, Grant had become very expert at working with bones. And somewhere along the way, he had started to forget the unprovable possibilities. That the dinosaurs might be truly different animals. That they might possess behavior and social life organized along lines that were utterly mysterious to their later mammalian descendants. In other words, he freely admits that paleontology can only ever know very little about an animal and almost nothing of its behavior. However, characterizing Grant as, quote, just the facts, ma'am, like out of Dragnet, that's not quite true either. Because as we talked about earlier in page 83, it was also mentioned earlier in the episode, for 150 years, ever since the discovery of gigantic animal bones in Europe, the study of dinosaurs had been an exercise in scientific deduction. Paleontology was essentially detective work, searching for clues in the fossil bones and the trackways of the long-vanished giants. The best paleontologists were ones who could make the most clever deductions. And all the great disputes of paleontology were carried out in this fashion, including the bitter debate, which Grant was a key figure, about whether dinosaurs were warm-blooded. In the novel, it's not only about the facts that you can prove without prejudice, it's also about making clever deductions. Now, in this script, they're already due to meet up with Hammond. They're riding in a limo because Hammond's a big spender, and it's not mentioned in the novel how they arrive at Chateau to catch Hammond's sleek Grumman jet. But so these are all kind of inventions of Scotch-Marmo as she's coming up with a way to get our protagonists to Jurassic Park as fast as possible. And I think it's authentic that, why are they going on this expedition in the middle of an important time of their season? It's for the money. And that is authentic to the novel as well. That's why they're there. Same with what Spielberg had in his final draft as well. All right, a big thank you to you for tuning in. If you're interested in more of the podcast, you can find it wherever podcasts are. And just look for Jurassic Park Cast, include those hyphens, or Jurassic Park Podcast. That might work too. And if you like the videos, you can like and subscribe and receive notifications when a new one is available. There's a lot more to come. Until next time.